going nowhere. I guess every teacher had his own idea of how to teach a class at Edgeview. Mr. Briggs obviously belonged to the crowd that thought a teacher should be a buddy and a pal. Miss Crenshaw was really getting into getting the class involved. Mr. Parsons was one of those teachers who experimented with all sorts of methods. Miss Nomad seemed to think a smile and a cheerful attitude would work wonders. Mr. Langhorne, the geography teacher, had a more traditional approach. Mr. Langhorne depended on discipline from start to finish. Strict discipline. As he stomped into the room, I sensed a change in everyone's mood. They had that pathetic look that a dog gets when it expects a whack on the snout with a rolled-up newspaper. Mr. Langhorne stood at his desk and glared at us for a moment. He wore his hair in a crew cut, and it almost looked like he ironed his suits. I had the feeling he spent a good chunk of each day polishing his shoes. Even though everyone was reasonably quiet, Mr. Langhorne began the class by shouting, "Quiet! No more talking!" His voice was hoarse, like he had suffered from a lifetime of yelling. Little bits of spit sprayed from his mouth. I was happy that the seats that Cheater had grabbed for us weren't in the front row. Being close to Mr. Langhorne for a class would probably be a lot like taking a warm shower. For the next hour, he filled us with geography facts. Anytime everyone fidgeted a little or whispered, Mr. Langhorne shouted. I remembered him yelling, shouting, ranting, raving, and snarling. I remembered him pointing at kids and demanding silence. I remembered him calling us all sorts of names, but I didn't remember a single fact that he told us about geography. Not one ocean or river or capital. I knew he talked about geography. When he wasn't yelling, he was teaching us about some country. I think it was South America. I think it was in South America. But as hard as I tried, at the end of the period, I couldn't recall a single fact that he had mentioned. That wouldn't have been a big problem, except that the class was ending. Mr. Langhorne strutted from desk to desk, firing questions at us. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who had failed to absorb the lesson. Nobody came up with answers. This definitely didn't please him. By the time he got to me, he was not a happy teacher. "You!" he snapped, bending over until his face was just inches from mine. He smelled like stale tobacco and sugar-free gum. "Tell me one thing you've learned today." I looked around the room, hoping for a clue. The walls were lined with travel posters. There were beautiful pictures of exotic places: Portugal, Singapore, New Guinea. "Are you an idiot?" Mr. Langhorne asked. He grabbed my jaw and yanked my head back towards him. "Don't look around the room. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Did I just waste my time? Can't you give me one simple fact?" He let his hand drop from my face. "Here's a fact," I yelled. "You've never been to any of these places. You just talk about them." It was a shot in the dark. I mean, most people don't get to travel a lot. I'd never been anywhere. For all I knew, maybe Mr. Langhorne had flown all over the world, but it was like Torchy's picture of Mars. You don't fill a room with posters of places you've been. You fill it with dreams. Still, as the words that I'd just shouted echoed in my mind, I figured it wasn't something that would get me in much trouble. Wrong again. Mr. Langhorne got redder. He leaned closer and grabbed the edges of my desk. I expected him to pick up the desk and break it across his knee. Apparently, I'd hit on the truth and it didn't make him happy. He stared at me for another minute. The bell rang. He stood up and backed away. "Class dismissed," he snarled. I got up slowly. I still expected him to hit me or twist my head off, but I got through the doorway in one piece. "Martin, wait up!" I turned towards Mr. Briggs, who was jogging down the hallway. "See you upstairs," Torchy said. He headed off. Cheater went the other way down the hall. I guess he was going to the library. "Yeah?" I asked Mr. Briggs when he reached me. "What you said before. Maybe part of that is true." He shrugged. "Maybe it's all true. But what I said was true too. I am here if you need someone to talk to, okay?" "Sure." I backed up a step. Just because he understood physics and chemistry didn't mean he had any chance of understanding me. "Is that all?" "That's all." I made my escape and headed off towards the stairs. One thing at Edgeview was no different than any other school that I'd been to. I had homework. Not a lot, but I had to do some math problems to do and some reading for English. From what I'd seen, at least half the kids didn't bother doing their homework, but I figure it would help kill some time. I decided to go back to the room and get started on it. As I reached the top of the stairs, a door down the hall flew open with a bang. Nobody came out of the room. I glanced inside as I passed the open doorway. That kid Trash, the one I'd asked about in the cafeteria, was in the room, sitting at a desk, hunched over with a pencil in his hand. Just after I turned my eyes away, I heard this fluttering whoosh, followed by a bang that made me duck and cover my head. Something had slammed into the wall right behind me, hitting hard enough to knock out a piece of plaster. All right, we got more evidence. So this says Dr. Struther Mandelbot, PhD, Dean of Administration at Swarthmore University in Aldenburg, Kansas. Dear Miss Crenshaw, thank you for your interest. We regret to inform you that the position of drama teacher has been filled. We will keep your resume on file for future consideration. Sincerely, Dr. Struther Mandelbrot, PhD. So we know that Miss Crenshaw is the history teacher who has the kids act out all of the historical events, like they're on the American Revolution now. And we know that she has an interest in drama, but she can't seem to get a job as a drama teacher.